Bitcoin is my savings and my retirement. And I'll always be thankful to have that. But truthfully, does that help my lifestyle right now? It really doesn't. It helps in no way. And so the value of cash flowing assets in any industry or realm is that your money is literally making you money.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Bitcoin is Hard. This is a Choice App production about Bitcoin and personal finance. I'm your host, Brian Harrington, and today we have great personal finance focused guest. We have Daniel Frank, who's a realtor, an Airbnb investor, invests in land and Bitcoin as well. And so, Daniel, I'm pumped for this because I want to see the real estate and Bitcoin crossover happen. And let's start it today. It's already starting, but this will just be a part of it today. And so, dude, introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about.
Sweet. Brian, let me first say thank you for being part of the Bitcoin movement. I love your boots on the ground attitude. Like seriously, you're always boots on the ground, which is what we need in building this. So my name is Daniel. I live in Boise, Idaho. I've been a realtor for 8 years, came from the personal finance, Mr. Money Mustache, rich dad, poor dad, buy real estate. So I became a realtor, started investing in single family homes, then kind of morphed into Airbnb. And then I'm buying land for myself and getting into that game in the last 18 months or so. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm about.
Perfect. And when did Bitcoin join the come on your radar?
Right when the pandemic started.
Okay.
Actually, that's a lie. In 2017, when there was that big run up,
Yep.
I had initially bought, I don't even remember the details. I've tried to remember. I think I bought like $500 worth or something, watched it crash down, got scared. I never invested before. And so I actually made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to invest. I was like, you know what? I just need to make money right now. Like I just need income, and became obsessed with that for about 3 years straight. And then right when 2020 happened and everything happened to everybody, right? I started to look into Bitcoin a lot more.
Cool. And talk to us more about that, like Mr. Money Mustache time and Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I've always been like into personal finance. Grew up on more like Dave Ramsey, like the 3 envelopes, and my parents would I'd put my quarters in the giving jar and the savings jar and the spending jar. So I would do all that. Listen to my dad, renegotiate the cell phone bill, renegotiate the cable bill, like on the phone, be like very, that kind of stuff. So, but saying all that to say, I never super would watch like the financially independent retire early, type YouTubers until later, just as I was hopping around YouTube. But so yeah, talk to us about that. Were you deep in the FIRE movement or what else about it?
I went super deep into the FIRE movement. I was the exact opposite. So I grew up in a broken home full of lots of bad things. So money was like the ultimate, nobody cared about it, right? My parents and my mom and stepdad ended up going bankrupt. And so I kind of grew up just thinking money wasn't important, So all the way up until I was about 24, 25, I didn't get it. I lived paycheck to paycheck, I probably had like 1,000 DVD Blu-ray collection, and I was so proud of it, but each one of them was $20. But anyway, I got into the FIRE movement from complaining to a squad boss when I was a wildland firefighter. And he said, you sound a lot like me when I was 21. Here, read this book. And he gave me The Richest Man of Babylon. And I hadn't read a book in years. But I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'll read it. So I read that, started to hit some keynotes about saving, then moved on to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, then moved on to some books and kind of just evolved from there. And then eventually made my way to Mr. Money Mustache and the FIRE community. And, the only thing that I wish the FIRE community would get is that it doesn't always have to be taken away. A lot of that, and it's not everybody and it's not every educator, but a lot of it is about not, what's the word I'm looking for? Sacrifice. You're always sacrificing. They never talk about actually making more money or understanding the economics. And that's kind of where I started to detach in the last 2 years of being like, okay, I'm part of the FIRE movement, but it's not evolving or growing in any way. It's kind of a stale movement right now.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's I want to
do you feel the same way?
Yeah, basically. Like, and that's why, but that's why it's helpful for me to ask other people that have observed it in different ways because, yeah, I agree. Like, because I'll watch some YouTubers and I'll comment on their like videos, and this they're not necessarily fire or whatever, but just personal finance YouTubers. And I would say like, hey, like, how come you don't like comment about Bitcoin like ever? Like, I feel like that's pretty like established thing that's like, or how come you're not like talking about inflation or whatever? Like you talk about how you have this like large balance like sitting in these sinking funds for XYZ goal, and then another sinking fund for other XYZ goal, and then like you're dancing around how it's like hard to buy a home, but you're not like hitting it. And like, so comment like that and people will just reply like, well, because I don't cover Bitcoin on my channel. And I'm like, okay, well, why? Like, I
Yeah,
don't understand. Like, what other solution? Tell me what's the solution like on your side? And so, yeah, I don't understand the hesitancy about it either. Actually, I do. I have one thought of the hesitancy, and it comes back to just that Bitcoin and crypto largely are still combined in a lot of people's brains. That's actually what it is. Like,
I
or is
agree.
would be my guess on it because when I get new people that come to meet up or just new people that I talk to out in the world or whatever, the number one thing I try to tell them is, look, when as you're listening to me talk for the next 90 seconds, like completely separate both these things. If you want to chase this down later, congratulations, like do it. But just let me explain to you that you need to break these apart and really understand Bitcoin versus fiat money. And if you don't know what fiat money means, then that's the step you're on. Then that's the stage you're on. So and people genuinely say like thank you after that. They say like, wow, that like sounded different. That's giving me something to go off of. And so yeah, I think yeah, kind of the same way like you tried out Bitcoin and then like brush it off. It's the same thing. They're like, and that's the same thing that happens to a lot of people. Like we try it, brush it off. Yeah, it just feels like a lot of the fire movement is still in the brush it off phase.
If I could add to it, I feel like everything you said is spot on. I would just add that sometimes in the fire community, it's a lot about personal responsibility, which is great, but it's almost like nobody's ever taking the time to go, okay, what's beyond my world? Because
Yeah,
us as Bitcoiners, like, yeah, we're hoping to make a return, we're hoping for a lot of things, but ultimately, like, we're hoping to change the world.
yeah,
At the end of the day, like we're in a rebellion and we're fighting for something special, and we all know that. And with the fire community, it's usually like, no, just how do I reduce my expenses? Where do I get a 7% return?
yeah,
Listen to the same guy, the Dave Ramseys, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they
yep,
never take the time to step out of their personal world and look at the huge, culture
yeah.
shifting things that are happening.
Yeah. No, and something that I think it was Whiteboard Finance said this, like there's the giant macroeconomic plates that like are moving right now are very, very hard for a regular person to overcome. Like, and you don't want to fall into a victim mentality, like, but you also need to recognize that and say, like, no, like there's very big structural things happening that are very hard, to overcome. Even if you play your cards right perfectly, and like it's not, there's no guarantee that you're like keeping pace with the giant things that are happening. And so that's what I would say also, to the point of like keeping your head down and working hard and like things, that's fine. But and then I like the way that you called out, I agree, we just did an episode on how like Bitcoin is very like, it's very much a financial thing to me, but it also is very much like a fix the world thing to me. You're right. And it's very hard to pull both of those apart. I ping pong between them like very, very fast.
I tell everybody that I onboard to Bitcoin, I always tell them, if you're not ready to be a rebel in a rebellion, then you shouldn't be a part of this,
Yeah.
because we're just starting this and there's enemies everywhere and it's going to get rough. Like
Yeah.
I'm not one of the Bitcoiners that says, oh, everything's gonna be rosy and this is gonna be easy. I think this is gonna be very difficult.
Mhm.
And I think just the psychopath and the energy users and all, that's just the beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
those are small potatoes. So
Mhm.
I always tell everybody, like, if you're wanting to be a part of this, you better be ready, because we're going to change the world. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's important to frame it that way,
Mhm.
so people know what they're getting into. I mean, we're literally trying to recreate money. Like,
Yeah.
what a crazy idea!
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, let's hit the real estate stuff. So, did you grew up in Idaho, like you're like a Boise guy, like before it was cool, like just born and raised, like, and Yeah, tell us about that.
So I actually was born in Bakersfield, California. When I
Okay.
was 5, I moved. My mom my stepdad and moved to Ontario, Oregon. It's a very small um, city on the border of Oregon and Idaho.
Hmm.
All of Eastern Oregon is essentially Idaho. That's there's this whole Greater Idaho movement. It's
Yep.
real. It exists.
Yep.
So essentially, and then Boise's an hour away, and so I moved to Boise when I was 21, and lived
Cool.
here ever since.
Okay. Awesome. That makes sense. How so? And you got into a little bit. So you were investing in single family homes and then switched to kind of Airbnb. Is that tell us about that. So like my wife and I we have one single family rental. The way that we got it was we moved up. So we had our primary residence, bought our first townhome primary residence, and then when we bought our next primary residence, we kept that one as a rental. So that was the strategy we used over living there for 2 years. But tell us tell us your approach to like single family and then now Airbnb.
Yeah, so I did something similar to you. Me and my wife did the same thing. Did the traditional, house hacking.
Hmm.
But then, the market exploded, right? And it's happening all across the nation. And so, back when it first started to really go up, and this was about 2019. I looked at my wife and I was like, we can't just buy a rental and be a normal real estate investor. We have to figure something out. Well, since I've been a realtor, I've always noticed that there is this huge niche that's not being taken care of. And it's twofold. One, all these people want to buy, but they have a house to sell. But if you've
Hmm.
ever sold a house, you know that it's difficult to sell and buy because when you go to buy, you have that contingency to sell. And nobody wants to accept that contingency. So what do? You're stuck. Or you have to make so much money and have so little debt that you can hold two mortgages at the same time. And let's be real, that's not
Hmm.
reasonable for most people.
Hmm.
So I came to her and I said, look, we can hit this market and the same market of people moving here. But a lot of people move to new cities and they don't really know where to live yet. But they don't
Hmm.
want to sign a year lease. And so where do they go? So we decided we were going to do that. So my wife, she's an architect and interior designer. She said, "Hey, how about we furnish it so we don't have to worry about our place getting messed up, and we'll just put it on Airbnb." I said, "That's great." So that's what we did. And the returns that we got, I mean, I was able to charge. I mean, do you mind me sharing numbers or
No,
anything?
yeah, would
Yeah.
love to.
I mean, my mortgage was 1,700, 1,600, somewhere around there. You add in all the utilities because you want everything in your
Yep.
name. So you're pushing around 2,100. I was charging anywhere from 5 to 6.5 grand a month.
Mhm.
And the way that I would do it was, and the reason Airbnb is such a critical component to all this is not only because they have all the people, but
Yep.
they give you such flexibility in one simple thing. You never think about it, naming the title of your listing. Now,
Mm.
if you go anywhere else, Zillow or any of the other big dogs, you can't name it. It's just 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,100 square feet, 5 grand. Nobody
Yep.
clicks on. But
Yep.
on Airbnb, you can go, need a monthly rental? Question mark. We've got you covered. And
Mhm.
that was just the bread and butter. And what I think people are missing with Airbnb is that they fundamentally think about it the wrong way. You're not getting into real estate. You're getting into customer service and trying to find a niche that is not being hit. And trust
Yep.
me, there's niches everywhere. You just have to create, you just have to know what your skill set is
Yep.
and be able to apply it to the market. So can I share
Yep.
you like one thing that I'm trying to do right now?
100%. Yeah.
So like in Miami, it was really hard to get an air. We both went to the Bitcoin conference. We weren't
Mhm.
able to meet up, but that's okay.
Mhm.
I noticed that it was very hard to get a big Airbnb. And the thing with it is that people forget when you have a big house, like let's say you had a 3,500 square foot house,
Mhm.
you can rent that out for corporate retreats. Especially if you're in a big city. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do right now is I'm
Mhm.
trying to find Boise is very up and coming. We're having tons of conventions. It seems like every month there's conventions, not Miami status by any means,
Mhm.
but you can charge these crazy rates and just view this Airbnb, view this house as purely a business. Don't
Yep.
even think about it as real estate. It is a
Yep.
business now. And the number one component is providing good customer service.
Mhm.
So always remember that when you're getting into Airbnbs.
Yeah. And so do you have your Do you So are you already like all the automation and everything of like or do you check them in yourself, or what's your strategy as far as like the automation of the door unlocking for them and like having your cleaner immediately show up when it's over and like everything? Talk to us about that.
So right now, I actually just sold my Airbnbs for I can't really get into it, but neighborhood reasons.
Yep.
There were some things happening in the neighborhood that I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. So I actually
Yep.
don't have anything right now.
Mhm.
But it really is simple. All you have to do is set up your systems beforehand, such as getting it furnished, getting your auto locks, getting your auto thermostats. And truthfully, these things don't cost that much money. And even in the Airbnb system itself, it will help you systematize your auto messages,
Yep.
sending them the proper lock info, check in and check out. I mean, Airbnb is doing really good work with, like, not only are they providing an excellent service to customers, they're providing good customer service to hosts as well.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't even say that you really need that much of a system. I'd say you just need time. Maybe it all just depends, right? So mine was a monthly rental. So I would have people renting for 2 or 3 months at a time, and I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would do is a checkout process, which was already laid out with the the
Yep.
sheet inside, and then my text messages, and then me and my wife, excuse me, me and my wife would just go clean it and then
Yeah.
put it right back. So
Sweet.
it really isn't that much time. It just depends what your niche is. So
Yep.
I have a friend. His niche requires a lot more time, and he
Mhm.
has to have actual systems in place because his niche is cabins that you have to ATV to or snowmobile to.
Wow.
So you're
Yeah.
talking about logistics,
Yep.
which is a whole other ball game.
Yep.
But I don't make anything too complicated. Just write it
Yeah.
down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then
Yep.
go do it. It's
Yeah.
not that difficult.
Yeah, that's really good to hear that. Just that the back end of Airbnb is really good for hosts. Like that's awesome to hear. I
Mhm.
because I truthfully haven't used the platform very much. So what would you say to kind of like people that say like all the niches are taken? I mean, you kind of already said there's just like still tons of space to like grow into this. So what do you say to kind of almost like real estate deniers almost? But I guess what do you say?
I would say it, if you're somebody who has, let's just say, a 9 to 5 job. There's nothing wrong with having a 9 to 5 job. I know people
Mhm.
crap on it all over, but let let the idea and creativity flow through you. And
Mhm.
that sounds really weird, but just imagine what you'd want. What would you be looking for in an experience for an Airbnb? There's literally there is no cap on this. I've been a big proponent of Airbnb. I stayed in them when they first launched,
Mhm.
and I have been in so many Airbnbs where their ranches out in the middle of nowhere next to a creek, and it's not luxury at all. They just have a canvas tent, a
Yep.
bed. They charge 150 bucks a night, and I get to go pet cows and chickens and lambs.
Yep.
All the way to what my buddy's doing with the ATV in the wild. There's corporate retreats. There's men groups. I mean, you could literally have. I mean, we could just make some stuff up right now. I mean,
Right.
could you appeal to a yoga person? Could
Right.
you appeal to the spiritual community? Could you me and my wife is a plant fanatic. I mean, when
Mhm.
we got to go to Florida, we went to a rare plant shop and she got all these rare plants. I mean, you could name your rental rare plant enthusiast heaven.
Right.
Just something,
Right.
like, obviously that name's bad, but like, you get
Right.
what I'm saying. Let the
Yep.
creativity flow and pretend you're a business owner.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going to become.
What's the impact then of the more that more and more people do this, and the more that kind of people talk about it online, and I've watched a lot of YouTube about people, Airbnb investors online. What is the impact that this is having then on like inventory? Like, is part of the low inventory because of this?
100%,
Hmm.
because people aren't updating their software in their brain. They're thinking in terms of 30 years ago, where the economy right now, like, as we look at it, I mean, how complicated and complex is our economy right now, and becoming more complicated every day. And
Yeah.
like any Bitcoiner that's listening to this knows that the more you learn about economics, the more you peel back and go, oh my gosh, there's just so many layers. And
Mhm.
so the idea is that this isn't having an effect, it would be ludicrous, because that's what people aren't taking in consideration. They're just assuming all these old factors,
Yeah.
and they're not factoring in the normal person's ability to be a business owner via Airbnb. They're obviously not accounting for huge hedge funds buying up massive. I mean, people would
Yeah.
be shocked. It's millions. It's not just like a few thousands. It's
Yep.
millions of single family homes. You have foreign investment, which has never really happened before at this level.
Mhm.
And so all of these are affecting the supply. Now
Mhm.
the interest rate has jumped up. Now the people who are going to sell, a house around here that would be like considered quote affordable would be somewhere between 350 and 450. Well, now those people aren't going to sell now, and now you've
Yeah.
just cut off a
Yep.
huge.
And say why that is. Hit why that is. It's because they already have a low interest rate, right? So why would they move,
Why
right?
would they? I mean, we're going to
Yeah.
see way more house hacking now. We're going to
Mhm.
see, and here's the thing: people. Well, let me back up. It's exactly what you said. The interest rate has spiked up. It's hovering around 5% right now. Doesn't mean you can't buy some points down. People always forget that. If you're going to have a home for 30 years, you can always buy down one or two basis points, right?
Mhm.
But now, I mean, I already see it in my sphere of influence where somebody I helped in 2017, they got a lot of equity. Hey, I started a family. I want a bigger house. Boom, the interest rate goes up. Oh, well, I locked in at 3.1
Mhm.
or 2.8.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not moving anywhere now. So that's going to have, like, people don't understand. These are going to be this is a decade problem.
Yeah.
We fundamentally already had a supply problem before all this money printing. We only were building around 4 million homes. I forget the exact quote. It was like 4 million homes a year we actually need around 10 million homes a year being built. So we already started off with loose footing, and this
Yeah.
whole this whole thing has just it's
Mhm.
made it a disaster, man. I don't know how it gets better.
Well, and so yes, the ability for anyone to become a small business through Airbnb, and then also with remote work. Like remote work is here to stay; it's not going anywhere. That hasn't even begun to like that changed everything. Like the world is not the same anymore.
And the thing is, normies think that it's over when we all know it's just begun. You've opened another lever for for the power to be back into the employee's hands of like,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to work here. This person's offering work from home. I live in Boise, Idaho. I can, quote, work in Chicago, a
Right.
Chicago-based company.
Right.
I see it all the time. I mean, I've helped
Yeah.
people
Is
move here that work for Salesforce and Facebook and all sorts of big
right.
places, and their incomes trump the incomes of here. And
Wow.
everybody wants to complain about it, but this is going to be the largest migration since the industrial age, and
Yeah.
we're just starting.
Is Boise mountain time? What time zone is it?
It's mountain time, yeah,
Okay. In the whole state's in mountain time?
pretty much.
Okay, cool. Um, the in Greater Idaho movement. I have to look that up. That's funny about Eastern Oregon.
Eastern Oregon,
Tell.
part of California, actually, and part of
Mhm,
Washington.
mhm. I like that. Like so Spokane, but like with Spokane, like they probably argue about whether they're in it or not.
Oh yeah, they would
Right.
definitely. There'd be some intense fights going on.
Perfect. I'll have to text a few people about that. What the okay? Something that you hear from Bitcoin Twitter a little bit is kind of this like anti real estate sentiment based on like property taxes and based on just kind of how like real estate is not supposed to be a store of value. We have to fix the money. Bitcoin should be a store of value, like that kind of thing. Real estate isn't really appreciating, the dollar going down. What's your just take on all of that?
Oh, man, that's complicated. I somewhat agree. I mean,
Mhm.
I somewhat agree in the sense that I mean, here's my position. Everything's so manipulated from every aspect that it's hard to even know the value of anything. Um, I would say that actually, I'll just speak freely.
Yeah,
I think
hit it.
that I think that real estate being a store of value, the way that it is today is very unhealthy. We know without a doubt that the way to have a good citizen, a responsible person, is to have them own a home. They're more likely to start families. They're more likely to get involved with their school system, with their soccer leagues. They're more likely to take care of their house. And the idea that the hyper financialization of real estate is kind of taking that away. And we can already feel how tense people are. I mean, there's already so many reasons to hate each other, right? Men
Mhm,
hate women, women hate
mhm,
men, feminists hate men.
mhm.
It's just endless. And so I actually really do get scared of a whole generation, or two generations now, millennials and um, what are they called? I forget. Is that
Gen Z.
Gen Z? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, the idea that they won't own homes, I mean, that's very
Mhm.
scary.
Yeah.
It's actually terrifying because I want people to have buy-in into this country. I
Yeah.
want them to have buy-in. And by, yeah, I guess I would be repeating myself, but yeah, the financialization of real estate is really sad. I would say that there is a lot of it, it's hard to understand because we want all of the stuff that we buy to go down in price. Like we want the lumber to go down, we want everything to go down, but we want our housing to go up. This
Mm,
doesn't make any sense, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of
With
sympathetic to it. I think it's a little bit more complicated than just what you see on Bitcoin Twitter, though.
no, for sure. So, and because I was gonna, so with all of that, which I think was said really well. At the same time, that doesn't mean that like the appreciation and cash flow potential of owning rental properties like is very real. Like, and that I
True.
think that's the whole thing of why it's complex is that holding both those things in your hand of like, look, yes, is this better money going to suck the monetization and suck the over financialization out of other assets that are being like the reason why real estate is a store of value and is a family savings account is because the money is broken. Yes,
Yes.
we know that. So, however, is if you're just straight up personal finance analyzing it, is owning a home and locking in your like pricing for your living expense for 30 years a good personal financial decision? Most likely, yes. If you
One-
have the ability to do that, yes, most likely that's a positive personal finance like decision. So, yeah, both those things can be true at the same time.
Well, and I've noticed that, with Bitcoin, the Bitcoin communities, we're always trying to make moral judgments, right? And if we look at it through that framework, what would be it not more moral, but at least like your own moral, ethical
Yeah,
line of like, well, if I need a return, and yes, we know the issues as you've stated, this shouldn't be a store of value, but we're dealing with the system we're dealing with. I'd much rather people support this system that benefits them and their community than putting it in the S&P 500.
sure.
And
Yep.
supporting woke,
Yeah.
companies and
Yep.
supporting the corruption that is Wall Street. I'm not saying you
Yep.
shouldn't invest in the S&P 500. Of course, it's a good investment, but I'm just going to say, like, I don't invest in the stock market really at
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
I'm morally opposed to the corruption and the rot that is there, and so I can't, from my position, give any money to those people. So now I'm left with a few
Yeah.
choices of real estate, Bitcoin, and land. And
Yeah.
so while we're fixing the world, it'll all solve itself out. But I need a return for my money for my family, and
Yeah.
that's just a fact.
Yeah. No, I think that was really well said. I don't invest in the stock market either. Like I hold
I'm glad
Bitcoin
to
and
hear
real
that.
estate. Yeah. I mean that's and do so talk to us about land and then yeah, we'll come back to rental properties because let's talk about land and then I think like rental property maximalists and like Bitcoin mining, I'm going to throw both of those in the same bucket. I think the cash flow of both of those is really interesting thing to analyze. But talk to us about land first. How do you approach like raw land deals and how do you make good decisions when it comes to raw land?
It's a big topic. Land is a completely different beast than a single family home. And the reason why is single family homes, banks love to lend on them. I mean, they just love it, right? Land is a completely different ball game because banks don't want to value it. They don't know. Oh, okay, the soil, the slope, the weather, the trees, does it have invasive, it's just too much.
Mhm.
So the things to know if you're, and we're in that Bitcoin and homesteading group. Did you
Yep.
start that group?
No, I didn't. No, a friend out of the Kansas City group started that. But
Nice.
no, that's the way we got connected was through Bitcoin and Homesteading Twitter group. So yeah, if anyone listening wants to join, we'd love to have you in there because yeah, this is where we started talking about how to buy raw land.
Yeah, exactly. And so with raw land, you really just have to have a goal and know what you want. And I think the biggest misconceptions that I personally see with raw land is people have this idea, and I don't know where it came from, but they have this idea that they just go buy raw land somewhere. There'll be no rules. That you just do whatever you want. And that is just not true. There's a lot of rules. It's way less rules than living in any city. But, there's these things called CC&Rs, and you still have to follow some semblance of rules. And you can't just build a house willy nilly. You need to have the proper permitting from the county. You need to know if you can dig a well. You need to know if you can put a septic. So don't think you're Rambo and you can just go buy some raw land and do whatever you want. There's
Mhm.
still county rules, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways too. Your county is the people that you go to. So when you're doing your own research for let's not even say raw land. Let's say it's
Yep.
some farmland, or let's say it,
Yep.
it does have a little mini house on it. You're going to want to always go to your county planning and zoning. You're going to want to go to your county assessors. These are the people you need to talk to. Two apps that are like the most underutilized in just your own personal research. On X, like ONX app, it's a hunting app.
Mhm.
And you can actually buy your state to where you can see road trails, utilities. It's incredible. So anytime I'm looking for a client or for myself, I immediately go there. It gives you a 3D rendering of what it looks like. And then if you need some, and you can see who your neighbors are, they
Mhm.
give addresses
It's
because all
split
of these
out by parcel, like it gives the parcel label. Yeah,
parcel
that's
lines and
amazing. That's
everything.
amazing.
It's
Okay.
amazing. And download your area and go
Mhm.
walk it. Obviously
Yeah.
get permission and everything.
Yep.
But you can it's not 100% accurate, but it's really dang close.
Yeah.
So that's one app that I never see anybody use. And then just Google Earth. I
Mhm.
mean, Google Earth is a phenomenal resource that's always forgotten. And their 3D, 2D rendering models, I mean, you can literally drop a pin and then do a 360 satellite view, instead of wasting your time driving 2 hours.
Yeah.
You can get an understanding of like, oh, this is something I would think about doing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time to talk about the lending, but
Yeah. No, definitely.
do
Or and then right before it hit some of those definitions of like I was using raw land and in all interchangeably. Like hit some of those. Like there's so agriculture or just if there is a improvement on it or there isn't. Like kind of describe some things we will run into.
So raw land is exactly that. Raw. It
Mhm.
has nothing. It has
Mhm.
no septic, no well, no road, nothing. It's just sometimes you'll hear raw land referred to as recreational land.
Hmm.
The two can kind of be used intermittently. Um, Agricultural land is going to be land that is currently farmed or zoned for farming. There will be a lot of confusion between agricultural land and industrial.
Mhm.
They'll be in the same spot sometimes. So before you get all hyped up, you need to understand industrial is for warehouses and shipping and things like that. You can get things zoned differently. Just know that you're in for a little bit of a battle depending on which state you live in, right? This
Yep.
is all hyper localized, right?
Yep.
Just in the places that I have, I work in about 5 counties in my area, and each county is vastly different. One county charges me $35 just to look at the parcel stuff. The other county right next door doesn't charge me anything, and the ladies love me. So everything's hyper localized. So feel it like that. So you have agricultural land, industrial, obviously commercial and residential,
Mhm.
and then recreational. And that's what I was saying. The raw land is usually referred to as recreational.
Mhm.
So
And then
there's
will some counties, their residential will then be split up into like rural one, rural two, or like kind of, right? Like I thought I saw that sometimes where they'll split up like what type of residential it is.
It just depends. It really depends on, like I said, the state and the county. Here's the number one factor that you should be looking out for as far as like if you're trying to be in the city versus if you're trying to be like out kind of away
Mhm,
is how easily will the county issue a building right and a
mhm,
building permit. Now
mhm,
this can be a double-edged sword. If it's difficult to get a building right and a building permit, that means that the county is against growth.
mhm.
But if that's what you're looking for, where you're looking, because a lot of people there, we talked about the great migration,
Yep.
big going to
Yep.
medium, medium going to small, small going out in the middle of nowhere. That's what's
Yep.
happening.
Yep.
So be aware of that. If a county is, if it is difficult to get that right and get that permit, it, do the work, get it, and
Yep.
then now you know, hey, this isn't going to grow that much. I can have my peace and quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So hit the lending stuff. What should people be aware of for land?
Okay. I first came across your Twitter page when you were starting Get on Zero.
Mhm,
Get off zero. Now we're getting on zero.
mhm,
I love it. But here's some things to be concerned about for Bitcoiners specifically.
mhm,
As much as I love it, and I'm trying to get my finances to that place, there are some elephants in the room that have to be addressed. One is if you're going to a typical lender that does land, farm, ranch, they don't like Bitcoin. They
mhm,
could care less. And so, for example, I own my primary home right now, and if I want to go get 40 acres, they would say, hey, we need 6 months liquid supply of your mortgage times six, right?
mhm, mhm,
Well, that's not a problem because I have it in Bitcoin. Well, they don't care about the Bitcoin. They'll take a
mhm,
401k, which is very interesting because that's not liquid, but
mhm.
we don't have to get into the
Yep.
BS of all that. But just know that if you're looking to buy land specifically, you're gonna want some cash reserves or your what do we call it, legacy assets for them to count. Now, if traditional lending doesn't work for you, um, don't rule out OwnerCarry. That's actually how I got my 27 acres. OwnerCarry is very simple. Instead of there being a lender involved, the current seller acts as the bank.
Mhm,
The terms and conditions are all negotiable. So just to put some hard numbers, we did a 17-year term for 1% of the balance every month. 10% interest rate, which is a little steep,
mhm,
but I was wanting to get it done to get some land. And so
mhm.
now I'm in the middle of getting a HELOC to pay that off with a HELOC that has 5%. So
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
Michael Saylor strategy,
Yep.
getting debt restructuring.
Yep.
So don't rule out owner carry. So many sellers are happy to do a deal.
Mhm. How do you so how do you find properties that will most people that are selling land advertise that they're open to owner carry, or you have to ask?
Usually they'll advertise.
Okay.
Usually they'll put it, in the MLS. Every MLS is so different, but if you have a good real estate agent, or if you don't and you just call the seller directly, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you
Mhm.
ask them if they'll take owner carry. Usually it's advertised in the terms though. They'll say, cash, conventional, owner carry. I would
Perfect.
say that um, 3 out of every 10 in around Idaho
Mhm.
offer owner carry. So it's not
Okay.
the majority of the market, but if you can't get traditional financing, well then at least you have 30% of the market to look at.
Yep. And what are some of the names are there go-to like agriculture lenders that you like shout out, or is that pretty localized also?
That is usually pretty localized. Let me get you the gal or not it's called Northwest Farm Credit Services. So
Okay.
they're kind of one of the big dogs in the entire
Yeah.
Northwest.
Mhm.
Again, they're going to be your typical lender. They
Yep.
don't do single family homes, but they'll do all sorts of farm, ranch, land, everything. But I mean, honestly, quick Google searches will get you. Shop around.
Yep.
get pre-approved. I say this all the time to anybody I work with. Get pre-approved. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no downside. And I've seen so many people be fearful of getting it pre-approved, and then this stellar piece of land hits the market, and now
Yeah.
they're working backwards and they can't
Yeah.
even move forward. So
Yep.
just get pre-approved. Like right now, I doubt I'm going to buy another piece of land, but I'm
Yep.
pre-approved for land. I have a
Yep.
HELOC, and I have, potential collateral to pull from my Bitcoin. I don't think
Yep.
there's anything wrong with having these options available to you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. So okay, and then the next topic was the just rentals again combined with just maybe thinking about Bitcoin mining. Because one thing that I think Bitcoiners that are like fully set on Bitcoin, understands the best currency, understands the best savings technology, I think sometimes can discount the value of cash flow, like the value of like owning assets, like pay you to own them, and are only about owning Bitcoin because it will inflation resistant, like improves its purchasing power over time. What do you do? What are your thoughts just like on cash flow, like the cash flow side of it? So whether it is, we don't have to go into Bitcoin mining if you don't have any thoughts on Bitcoin mining, but it'd be like, why is owning a rental, whether it's Airbnb or long term, like a good thing to own?
Because at the end of the day, what is money used for? It's used to make our lifestyle better. I mean, yeah, sure, you can talk about your 40-year retirement plan, and that's great. Yeah, and that's how I view Bitcoin. Bitcoin is my savings and my retirement, and I'll always be thankful to have that. But truthfully, does that help my lifestyle right now? It really doesn't. It helps in no way. And so the value of cash flowing assets in any industry or realm is that your money is literally making you money, and you have that ability to uh, go on that extra vacation, is get your kid whatever they want, an ATV.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've kind of strayed away from that as a society. It's always this focus on 401ks and the retirement, but I don't want to live my best life at 70. I want to live a life right now. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that there's anything besides a major inheritance
Hmm.
that comes close to cash flowing assets. Don't
Hmm.
discount it at all. I mean, you're hitting it right on the money.
Hmm. Well, and I think even outside of just like only saving for the future or whatever, I think we're hyper obsessed with investments that we can like, how do you buy it, watch it go up and sell it, buy it, watch it go up and sell it. Like we're not, and I don't know if this is an age thing or like, you know, a single family rental, an Airbnb, like owning a laundromat, like owning a gas station, like owning Bitcoin miners, like each of those things like is an asset themselves. Like they will hold like value. Like a miner will hold value and ride over time. A laundromat will hold value and ride over time. And yes, even if your like principal is going down in Bitcoin terms because like Bitcoin itself is like the sats themselves are increasing in purchasing power, that still doesn't mean that like owning the home is a bad investment. Because
No.
I say all the time, like, dude, if Airbnb like adds the ability to get paid in Bitcoin, which like they're going to, or if you run your own rental, you can negotiate with the people to pay you in Bitcoin if that's what you want to do. Like that's gonna be such I'm excited for that day. Like I'm excited for that day. More and more Bitcoiners hit financial freedom and begin to just acquire assets for sats on the dollar and buy up small businesses, buy up rentals, buy up Airbnbs,
Hmm.
and continue to just turn them into, sats, like sats flow.
Hmm. Well, and I mean, imagine how good of a renter you're going to have if you attract somebody that wants to pay in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already been said before, but when I work with Bitcoiners, I'm working with somebody that has integrity and that understands long term, that our relationship is the most important. And so, I mean, I love that idea of getting
Yeah.
paid in Bitcoin from a rental or from an Airbnb. I mean, just the quality of individual is just, I'm sorry, it's gonna be better.
Yeah.
So shout out to Cody Sanchez. I just came across her, and anybody. I mean, what we're talking about as far as finding businesses, side hustles, whatever it is, to start getting cash flow. She is incredible. I mean, the stuff that she finds with laundromats, I mean, the people she'll interview, unbelievable resource to dive into and then figure out where you can start getting some cash flow.
For sure. I would second that. Second that. And it's cool to see her on Pomp's channel often. I'm
Yes,
seeing her pop up on there, which is positive. I agree. My wife and I follow her. We should, yeah, Cody, if you're listening, you should come on the podcast. I might send that message right now because you're right. That's a
absolutely.
good shout out. Yeah. So Daniel, wrap us up. Any final thoughts and like tell people where they can find you and follow you?
Final thoughts would be that, real estate is a great investment. We've talked about that. I would be remiss, or I would feel unethical if I didn't mention that real estate is an attack vector. At the end of the day, I view the number one attack vector for, the government needing money for taxes after we just printed how many trillions, is 401ks. They will attack those first, and then the easy target is real estate. When and if that'll ever happen, I have no clue. But just always keep track of what's going on from a law perspective, of what bills are being passed, not only at a federal level, but a local level. Right now in Boise, they passed a local Airbnb ordinance where you have to, it's nothing big, it's $40 a year, so they can know how many Airbnbs are in the market. Right or wrong, I don't really care. But if that starts to escalate, well, my opinions might change. So just know that real estate is ever evolving, ever changing, and just be on the lookout. And then you can just find me on Twitter. I'm not super active. I try to be, but at Boise Champion on my Twitter page. And then if you want
Perfect.
to buy some real estate or land in Idaho, give me a shout out.
Perfect. Awesome, man. Thanks so much for talking today.
All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter at Brain Harrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.